is Miss Di Marie. Di, what's going on?
Hello.
And back from the beach, Miss Jenna SayWhat. Jenna, what's going on?
I'm good. How are you?
Very, very well. So today we've got a very special episode. We're going to get into Top Jedi, but of course, we want to focus on anniversaries and stuff when it comes to films. And if you guys don't, recognize the hat, actually, this is a very special thing because you will never see me cosplay, but in reference to the movie, and then of course in honor of Dr. Jones himself, I figured, have to wear a fedora for this. So our episode is actually going to be focused on Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is celebrating its 40th anniversary right now. And now we live in a time where Harrison Ford at 70 years old is still wearing the hat and the whip, which is insane. But let's get into Top Jedi. But first off, we just want to thank you for your continued love and support when it comes to the show. If you could, please like and subscribe. It just helps us get out to more people. And please use that comment section. Let us know, what you think, when it comes to certain topics or, what you're into. We just want that to be as much of a community as the show itself. So, we want to hear from you. So, make sure that definitely happens. So with that, we're going to do Top Jedi. So let's start off with Scarlet Witch news, which is pretty much my forte. A lot of these ladies think that maybe Loki is the best series that Disney Plus has to offer. And I don't know. I'm on the fence when it comes to that. I do love Loki quite a bit, but I don't think anything will ever top WandaVision. That's just my feelings. But there's actually some great news for people that are fans of Scarlet Witch, because there was a Paley Center interview that Kevin Feige, the president of Marvel Studios, just did. And he actually had a question that involved the evolution of Wanda Maximoff. And he basically said that her journey after Doctor Strange 2 would not be the end. So there's going to be more places and more ways that he's going to introduce her into the world of Marvel as Scarlet Witch, which is really super, super duper exciting. And kind of piggyback off of that, which is really kind of an interesting thing, because there was a Darkhold series that was actually held due to the pandemic, but involves Scarlet Witch and, of course, the Darkhold, which is the evil book that was shown in WandaVision, which was kind of retconned from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and all that stuff. And she's basically like in this, this Darkhold story. And there's also like an offshoot comic that's happening at the same time called The Death of Doctor Strange. So my theory is that Wanda ends up becoming Sorcerer Supreme. I don't know if that's actually going to end up in the movies, but I think that's where Marvel's going with her.
It's interesting.
Yeah, but that's like super exciting news, especially for somebody like me that's like a huge fan of Scarlet Witch. And I'm always happy to see, just like other actors that we talked about on the show, like coming into their own when it comes to characterization and stuff like that. Like Elizabeth Olsen is definitely like in her pocket when it comes to that character.
That is her character.
Oh, most definitely.
As we've discussed before.
Yeah, most definitely. And you could see that she actually appreciates where that character is going, which is nice. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'm really excited for that. What's next in Top Jedi, Jenna?
So Carrie Fisher is finally getting her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2022. Man, there's not going to be a dry eye in anyone's home. Like that's going to break my heart, but she deserves it. It just makes me so sad that she can't be here to be there for it. And it's gonna be rough on all of us, but we all know that it's very well deserved, and we miss her. So yeah, it's well deserved though, Carrie.
Well, I don't want to get into the logistics, but I've mentioned many times throughout my career that Carrie Fisher kind of saved my life, and unknowingly, obviously. And this is something that should have happened, quite a while ago, and not even just for the fact of, being in Star Wars and being the raconteur writer that she was, but also just the sheer fact that she is Hollywood royalty, being the daughter of Debbie Reynolds, she's been part of that pipeline, like the Los Angeles pipeline, her entire, childhood, into adulthood. So,
now a daughter too.
Spot. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Billy was amazing. Yeah. Di, what's next in Top Jedi?
Just as a little add-on to Juneteenth, President Joe Biden actually signed a bill to declare Juneteenth as a federal holiday, which is amazing. But to get into Pop Jedi news, The director of Candyman, Nia DaCosta, released a special video message about the plot of Candyman and how it ties into Juneteenth and current events and things like that. She also released some new images from the set of Candyman, as well as a new poster showing Candyman, and it says "I dare you" on the back. If you guys didn't see the trailer, it looks absolutely creepy, and Jordan Peele is also producing the movie, which I think is going to be amazing. Yeah. But in the video released by the director, just to give you guys a little snippet, she said that Juneteenth is a day that has historically recognized the perseverance of the Black community. What's going to be great about this movie is the fact that it's going to kind of highlight the duality of the Black experience of America, kind of like the opportunities that they were able to finally experience, as well as the horrors that they've experienced throughout history. And the character of Candyman is going to kind of embody the pain throughout what other people have experienced. So this is going to be released on August 27th. It was postponed because of COVID from last year. So
yeah, it's highly anticipated. And the one thing I did love about her Juneteenth message was that, in history, we have tendencies to turn men into monsters. Mm-hmm. And, I think that's, it's a beautiful sentiment when it comes to what Candyman is. Because if you remember, obviously it was later on in the series, is that, this man was just, he was a painter, he was a romantic, and he was in love with a white woman, and that just happened to be his only crime. And he ended up getting horrible torture and treatment from that angle. And I think that first of all, Jordan Peele, yes, he has everything to do with it when it comes to producing and stuff, but this is absolutely Nia DaCosta's movie, and I'm really excited to see what she's going to bring to the table in this. She calls it kind of like a spiritual sequel, you know what I mean? Yeah. Because Vanessa Williams from the original is in it, so I don't know where that angle is going. What's next in Top Jedi, Jenna?
So Zack Snyder's back in the news, but not for what you think. So DC kind of put out there that Batman is not such a cunning linguist.
That makes sense.
Yep. Catwoman. Mm-hmm. So Zack Snyder ended up posting a canon drawing of the two of them
on a rooftop. Yep.
On a rooftop, doing some cunning linguistics.
Yeah, he was eating, which is probably the best way to put it.
Sometimes you don't want to eat in, and you just need to go eat out.
That's right.
So and that's what heroes do. And
that's absolutely what heroes do. Guys, do you hear that? If you're a hero, you do that. Okay.
Yep. Zack Snyder, I feel like, has become the real MVP of the DC universe.
Oh,
he really has.
He is just taking jabs at him, and I'm loving it because he's good at what he does, and they held him back.
Mm-hmm. This is the biggest FU, I think, from Zack Snyder yet.
Yes, I agree.
Because they are trying to, I guess they're trying to keep this wholesome mentality, even though Harley the animated series was just completely off the rails, R-rated. And
oh yeah,
that just happened to be the thing that they were just like, no, that's not what heroes do. He can't be doing that on the cartoon, which is ridiculous.
Right.
But this is Zack saying, you know what? I got a cushy home at Netflix. They let me do whatever I want. And you know what? You can go F yourself. And I'm going to say whatever I want to say about you now, because I'm never coming back. Di, what's next in Top Jedi?
So Hyundai just released a series of different commercials featuring the main characters from the original Disney Plus Marvel series. So the first release trailer featured Loki. The second trailer featured Anthony Mackie as Captain America, and the third trailer featured WandaVision and kind of like a sitcom kind of theme. And the main theme of all the commercials was to question everything, what I thought was cool was that Loki had the highest numbers out of all the commercials. That hit 2 million views worldwide, which is pretty awesome. Yeah, so they're really fun. They're about like maybe, I don't even think they're like 20 seconds long. So if you guys haven't seen them yet, check them out. They're really cute.
Also in Top Jedi news, you had some more Marvel news when it comes to Black Widow, Diana.
Yes, I did. So there are pre-reviews up about Black Widow. So a lot of them seem to be pretty positive across the board. But something that caught our attention was that Yelena Belova, played by Florence Pugh, has been targeted as an icon. A lot of reviewers are saying that she's here to stay, and yeah, she's just getting a lot of accolades for her performance, which I'm really excited to see. And then about the film itself, people are saying that's funny, emotional, action-packed, but especially there's a lot of character moments and like character development throughout the movie that I'm excited to see. So I think that's going to be a huge hit.
Well, sadly, I'm going to be honest with you, and this is something that I've heard from a few people recently, you know, like YouTube influencers that I follow and stuff like that, who got to watch the film recently, and a lot of them are saying that it doesn't necessarily do justice to Natasha Romanoff as a character. It doesn't seem like the proper send-off for her. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I guess it's kind of like in the eyes of the beholder. Like the whole thing with them is that this is going to be probably the most divisive film that Marvel has put out. You know, when it comes to a character that you love and her journey and where it's actually going. But, you know, I really think this is, you know, if I had to guess, this is absolutely the moment where we are supposed to be introduced to Florence as the new Black Widow. You know what I mean? Like this is the thing it's supposed to.
Oh, okay.
That's what I think. And you know what? I'm fine with that. And that was something that I predicted, you know, months ago, that she was going to be the standout, because Black Widow before the pandemic was actually supposed to come out before Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I guess. And you know, they ended up changing the storyline for whatever reason, I guess, you know, because they had filming issues due to the pandemic or whatever. But I think, you know, particularly they were trying to introduce the Thunderbolts into the show, which is, you know, like a whole different thing that, you know, we can deeply get into. But, you know, Yelena Belova is obviously, like, she's, like you said, she's here to stay. And last in Top Jedi news, before we actually get into our celebration of Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones in 2021. Harrison Ford, a 70-year-old man, is wearing the fedora and carrying the whip right now as we speak, filming Indy 5. And from the looks of it, you know, like it seems like James Mangold, the director, is actually getting into, you know, more of the Nazi aspects of the, you know, of the original films. And, you know, whole thing with, you know, people thinking like, oh my God, this is going to be another Crystal Skull or whatever. James Mangold was the one that did Logan. So I think, you know, that guy is like a swan song director. He's able to take these iconic characters and put them in a place where, I don't know, like, you know, they're kind of, you know, going through their own season and stuff when it comes to age and stuff. So I think that this guy is the perfect person to, you know, to bookend this series. So as I said before, our topic for this week is the 40th anniversary of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And, you know, before we actually get into the, you know, just kind of the meat and potatoes of the thing when it comes to, you know, these ladies, you know, watching it for the first time in many, many years, you know, just want to get into a little bit of history, you know, when it comes to this film. So this was a passion project for George Lucas at the time, who was, you know, a kid who grew up with serials. You know, when you used to actually go to the theater and, you know, watch, you know, these old serials like Flash Gordon and all these different things. And, you know, really just kind of wanted to bring that to the forefront when it comes to an actual feature film. So him and Spielberg were actually friends at the time. And, you know, it's interesting because George Lucas at the time was so terrified of the reviews from Star Wars, from A New Hope, that he actually ended up heading off to Hawaii so he wouldn't have to hear about the reviews, because he just thought they were going to be just stinky and terrible. And that's where he invited Steven Spielberg to come hang out with him. So him and his wife came to Hawaii and they started banging out this concept that was originally going to be Indiana Smith.
I'd be here for it. I'm a Smith.
It doesn't.
No,
Yeah,
it doesn't ring.
necessarily
It
hit.
doesn't ring a bell. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not good. It doesn't
Yeah.
roll off the tongue.
No, it doesn't. So, so when they were coming up with this idea, there was actually a bunch of people that were in the casting process, or people that they actually wanted to star in the film, including Nick Nolte, I think was one of them, and Tom Selleck was actually supposed to be Indiana Jones, but unfortunately he had to go and do Magnum PI at the time. There's actually, I think on one of the DVDs, there's actually there's an audition tape of Tom playing Indiana Jones. Like, I think there's actually like some costume stuff with him.
I have to see this.
So because of that, scheduling issue, obviously, Harrison Ford was somebody that George Lucas has worked with, with of course, the Star Wars films, and even before that, he was actually working on his deck before he became an actor, which is crazy. So he knew Harrison very well, and he just knew that he would be right for the part. Steven Spielberg was, obviously agreed with him, and that's where we got Indiana Jones. So, in the 80s, this was a film that didn't necessarily, the thoughts were that it wasn't necessarily going to burn up the box office when it came out, because you had all this other competition like Superman 2 at the time. And, so when it came out, like, it didn't necessarily burn up the world, when it first came out. So as time went on, I guess through word of mouth and, good criticism and stuff like that, like, that's when it really started to become a barn burner at the box office, and stayed on the box office list for a long, long amount of time. And it was like, one of the top films of that year. And, it's just crazy to me that at this very day, not even the fact that Indiana Jones is still wearing this hat right here. It's just amazing to me that, this is something that, that young kids know about, because of their parents. It's just like one of those things that's just been, generational time.
Yep.
That everybody knows who Indiana Jones is. Because, some things, when it comes to popular culture, especially things what we grew up with, like, kind of slips through the cracks. And this just happens to be the one that has staying power, just like Star Wars, or just like, Star Trek, whatever. It's amazing, its longevity. So you guys had actually had seen the film. It is actually, as we said before, it's celebrating its 40th anniversary. I would honestly say that, for me, it's pretty much a perfect film experience. I don't think there's anything like it. And I think, not only does it model a lot of films that came after it, but it's just stylized in its own way, where it just feels like it's in a time period where filmmaking was filmmaking. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But, like I said, you guys, got to enjoy it, because we're talking about it. So, Jenna, let's go with you. What did you think of Raiders of the Lost Ark?
I went into it because, like, about me, if I watch a movie once, I'm probably not going to remember it. So realistically, that's kind of a good thing and a really bad thing. So, like, the good thing is like, I watched this with almost completely fresh eyes, because the last time I saw it was like whenever I was like little, like early teens, maybe tweens. And there were so many parts and like jokes and things that I just didn't catch. There were things that were said that I didn't catch because I was too young. So it was like, oh, that's what that means. Or like, catching up on like the little cues and things like that. And then like, I have to admit, like, my favorite scene is the snake pit, for like so many reasons. Like, it's that movie, like, the entire time I was questioning, I was like, I don't know if this is technically a comedy, but there's so many funny parts in it that are just silly and off the cuff and just, ridiculous. And they just go along with it. And then the snake pit scene, there was so much horror in it. It was just like, it was like a buffet of genres of movies. And it was, I couldn't appreciate that as a child. I'll just say that. And again, rewatching it, it was just like, wow, this is an incredible film. It really, truly is. So, and I was sitting there thinking, I was like, I can see myself being, like having this as one of my go-to movies that I have on in the background that I'll eventually just like know and memorize by heart, just because I'm probably going to be playing it all the time now. But yeah, it was such a good film. Such a good film.
Diana, what was your experience watching Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark with fresh eyes?
So as I've talked about in the past, like I am learning how to become a makeup artist. So special effects is something that I pay a lot of close attention to, just so I can kind of get inspiration for my own projects. So seeing the kind of cartoonish violence and gore in the movie kind of surprised me that they were able to show that in this kind of film, but it wasn't bad enough to where it would probably traumatize a child. Maybe it would, but I was a weird kid growing up. I love that stuff, but I really enjoyed watching that. I just kind of think that this movie is in the tier of like Evil Dead, where I think that kind of created the platform for like, you know, campy, haunted cabin in the woods, you know what I mean? Yes. And Indiana Jones sets the platform for like action films. And as a kid, I really wanted to be an Egyptologist. I love ancient history and things like that. So watching that
as an entertainer of ancient antiquities.
If I could do my life over, I definitely would want to go through that route, because like characters like Tomb Raider and stuff like that, I just love it. So just see
I want to live. I'm too accident prone, and I am too like I'm not situationally aware. I would die. There's no way that I would survive 5 minutes in an Indiana Jones film.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that moment. Let's talk about that aspect for a second, because you had mentioned, you know, Tomb Raider, and of course, you know, Angelina Jolie, you know, obviously, you know, played Lara Croft, and, you know, she was, you know, very much sexualized in that film. And the thing that's really fascinating about this film in particular is that it's not Marion Ravenwood that's sexualized. It's actually Indy himself. So as, you know, by the time, you know, the movie even kicks in, like, you know, these girls are writing, you know, I love you on their eyelids. And
oh my gosh, I love that so much.
He's so oblivious to how handsome he is. You know what I mean? Because he's so focused on books and text and history and science that stuff doesn't really register with him. But he's to me.
Rewatching that movie, I felt really weird for thinking that Harrison Ford is hot in that movie. I was like,
he still is.
What is happening?
Like wine.
And like now I'm scared to look at new photos of him, because I'm like, please don't give me another crush. God, please don't. And it's gonna happen now, and I'm just not prepared for it.
I am very much an Indiana Jones fan because, you know, I'm 42 and I grew up with this character. And, you know, when you're a kid, you know, just like, you know, Han Solo, or just, you know, for me, it was actually the biggest one for me was Mel Gibson as Mad Max in The Road Warrior. That was like, you know, when I saw him, or Michael Biehn in Alien, you know, playing Corporal Dwayne Hicks. These are the guys that really caught my attention. But Indy obviously was a huge, you know, part of that, you know, where you look at him, you're just like, oh my God, like he's amazing. And he's a, you know, like, he's like a swashbuckler, and like, he knows so much stuff, and, you know, this and that. But, you know, as you're watching this, you know, with older eyes, which is something that I did very recently because of the show, Indy is not a good guy, really. He's got a lot of flaws.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of those flaws, we unfortunately have to mention this because it's part of history. But, you know, when they were actually pitching this story, you know, when it comes to the character of Marion Ravenwood, she was initially supposed to be 11 years old when Harrison Ford basically ripped her heart out of her chest and just ruined her life. But let's get into that character, because, you know, in my honest opinion, you know, we're talking about obviously Princess, you know, AKA General Leia. You know, we're talking about, you know, Batgirl, and we're talking about, you know, Scarlet Witch, and we're talking about all these different characters. But, you know, one that really kind of slips through the cracks is Marion Ravenwood. She is probably one of the toughest women I've ever seen.
She's a baddie for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the really fascinating thing with Marion is, you know, she gets out of a lot of, you know, scrapes through drinking.
Yes.
That woman can hold her liquor.
Oh my God.
But
like right out of the
you can
gate
also,
too.
yeah, but in a weird way, you can also tell that, you know, a lot of that, you know, a lot of that hard drinking and smoking and all that stuff probably had a lot to do with the emotional damage that Indy put upon her.
Yep.
She couldn't
Probably.
really break through all that. You know what I mean? Like all that
Yep.
trauma, whatever that trauma is.
Yeah, it's just the fact that they didn't really touch on that again. I was just kind of like, ooh, what really happened? But it was probably a really controversial topic that Spielberg didn't want to touch on.
You know, the first time we see Indy walk into her bar, you know, in Tibet or, you know, wherever it is in the Himalayas, she, you know, obviously she doesn't have a pot to piss in her window to throw it out of because she's going to do anything for $1,000. You know what I mean? She's like totally into that bet. Like, you know, yeah, you know, like I'll drink whoever under the table. I'll fight anybody I have to fight. But Indy first walks into that bar and like, you know, the first thing you see is his shadow like looming over her. So it's almost like he is kind of like a specter of her, you know, emotional, you know, like, oh my God, like this, you know, this guy is coming back into my life. He's terrible. I hate this guy.
And the way he addressed it too kind of irritated me because he's just like, okay, like the past is the past, basically. Let's move on. And I'm just like,
doesn't work like that.
Which is pretty much the motivation for a lot of guys, unfortunately. We're just like,
yeah.
Listen, I'm here, babe. You know, let's bury the hatchet and, you know, like kiss and make up.
No.
Yeah, the first thing he does is cold cock him, you know?
No. She was such a badass broad. Like, she was just amazing.
I absolutely agree. Actually, Karen Allen, she wasn't the first choice to play Marion. I think she actually won Spielberg over during the audition process. She'd also, you know, she'd done some work with George Lucas back in the day. And, you know, of course, she was known for, you know, her work in Animal House and stuff. And I really think she's an amazing actress. There's actually a horror film that she did in the 90s, which is kind of fun, called Ghost in the Machine. I thought she was cool in that. So she's done some really cool stuff. And of course, she came back to the franchise, good or bad, when it comes to the Crystal Skull. But yeah, like, you know, like I said, you know, like she's just one of those women that, you know, should be talked about a lot more when it comes to, you know, these badass women list or, you know, whatever, like, you know what I mean?
She really should. Like, I didn't appreciate that growing up, like at all, because I didn't understand how
we couldn't relate to that yet.
Yeah, and how tough she truly is as a person. I couldn't comprehend that at the age that I watched it, and rewatching it, I was just like, wow, she's powerful. She's very well aware of herself. She's doing what she has to do, and she's just a badass.
Yeah. So the other thing I really appreciated about Raiders of the Lost Ark that I don't know if you caught on to is that, you know, sometimes when you're watching a movie, well, a lot of times when you're watching movies, it seems like, you know, there are side characters that don't necessarily have anything to do with the story. With this particular, you know, outing, you know, with Raiders of the Lost Ark, it felt like all these characters had a purpose. Like everybody that's on the screen had something to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You had your mustache twirling villain. You had Belloc, which was, you know, obviously he was a villain to a certain degree, but he also had a certain, I don't know, dare I say, Jenna SayWhat, you know what I mean? Like, he was just very, you know, very debonair, even, you know, in his, I don't know, I mean, he was kind of, you know, creepy too. I mean, you know, putting her in that dress and stuff, you know, just to have a drink with him and whatnot. But
and then watching her from the mirror, I was like,
the entire time I was like,
please stop now.
I don't want this.
Yeah,
we never wanted this.
But they all, you know, they all had a certain, you know, they had a certain purpose, you know, within the story. So, you know, I guess, you know, my question to you is, you know, is there anybody aside from Marion and Indy that, you know, like really like hit you as far as characterization?
I would like to shout out to George Applewhite, the little monkey. I thought he was so cute.
I was so sad about that.
Bad dates.
Rest in peace.
R.I.P. little
he
guy.
was so cute.
However, he was a snitch
You know, I think the most interesting thing about, you know, any film in the 1980s, especially, you know, something like this, is that, you know, it is technically geared towards adults. And like you were saying,
Mhm.
Jenna, like it does have like a very adult vibe to it when it comes to the jokes and all that. But, you know, the violence is also, even though it's not necessarily like in your face, like,
Mhm.
I mean,
It
when a
was
Nazi
pretty
gets shot in the head,
hardcore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, when a Nazi gets shot in the head, I mean, you do see like, you know, blood spurts, or, you know, when one gets, you know, rolled under a truck or whatever, like, you know, you do kind of see
What
that
Yeah.
was
pain.
this movie rated?
It
It
was
was PG at
PG.
the time.
Yeah, like you would not be able to get away with that in this day and age. That's
No,
what's so
that's
great about the 80s.
Hmm.
that's like what, PG-13 at this
No,
point?
no, it
Maybe
was actually
R.
it was PG at the time.
No, I mean like for today's standards, would it be PG-13?
Oh, it would definitely
I
be
think it is,
PG-13.
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
R.
Yeah, because like it was kind of cheesy though. Like you could tell that it was fake,
Yeah.
but like yeah, I was surprised by the gore too, actually. It was like,
Yeah, I mean,
oh,
you know, just thinking about, you know, like
I guess.
this hulking German, like getting punched into a propeller is, you know, like,
Yeah.
you know, that's not something you necessarily, you know, like equate
Yikes.
to you know, to something you're supposed to show your child. You know what I
Right.
mean?
It kind of felt like they were kind of switching in between like cartoonish violence and then hardcore violence.
Yeah.
Yeah, most
Like,
definitely.
yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was really entertaining. I enjoyed watching
Yeah,
that.
I definitely enjoyed it too.
Yeah, so, you know, like, I mean, not even just the violence, but, you know, like I was mentioning before, you know, this kind of story and this kind of filmmaking doesn't necessarily happen in this day and age. You know, everything, you know, involves obviously, you know, CG and, um, you know, all these different, you know, like aspects when it comes to, I don't know, like just these ridiculous like stunt sequences that don't necessarily
Mhm.
like have any real rhyme or reason to them. You
Yep.
know, Fast and the Furious, for example.
Oh, how
Um,
dare you? No, just teasing.
but like, you know, with this, it felt like these stunts, even though they were, you know, large in scope or whatever, it felt more realistic, you know, obviously because A, they were doing them, you know, in real
Yeah.
time. But also, you know, I don't know, it just like it just felt majestic, you know, because, you know, it was just a time period that you know, like it still felt like cinema. Like it wasn't.
Yeah, it's just
Yes.
kind of like what I was saying earlier, like Evil Dead, they didn't have to rely on CGI and things like that. They relied on art and talent, and that's what makes these movies so iconic.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And they're still quotable even to this
Mhm.
day, which going back into watching it, I didn't realize how much other pop culture references this movie. It's
everywhere.
everything does.
And you see a lot of it in Marvel too.
Yeah, you see it everywhere. Like it blew my mind rewatching it, and I was like, oh my god, those were all those references, and this was that. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, just the impact that this movie had in the film industry is amazing. And then,
Yes.
like what you said, rewatching it, you see how much of an impact it did have on what we see today.
Yes.
So,
Absolutely, I 100% agree with both of you. And, you know, the thing about this film is that, you know, like it was just so linear when it came to, you know, the actual adventure aspect of it. You know, when it comes to, you know, the globe trotting and the treasure hunting and all that stuff, it didn't necessarily, you know, I could see how it would shock people at the time. You know, all of a sudden having this like supernatural vibe attached to it. You know, and it just comes out of nowhere, you know, when it comes to this, you know, this arc.
Hitler
You know,
loves the supernatural. Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, I seriously, I feel like this is a smorgasbord of like
Everything.
genres of movies where you're just like, oh, I'll just have a little bit of everything, and you're just like putting on your plate. Like that's what I feel like this movie was, and it itched every scratch that I could need in a movie. Like it just it was good. It was such a good palate cleanser for like all the movies I've seen recently. It was so pleasant. It was just
Yeah, it's really refreshing.
Yes.
Yeah, and you know, the other cool thing about Indy is like, you know, obviously he's very highly intelligent, you know, when it comes to what he knows and what he can do, but he's kind of a bumbling idiot too. And it kind of reminded me of, like I would equate him to, not saying he's not tough or he doesn't know how to fight or anything like that, but he's not very technical. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like even when the, when he's, when the guy's like, throwing his, sword around or whatever, he's just like, like I'm not doing this with you. Come on.
Yeah.
He's just very, I don't know. He kind of reminds me of like a Jack Burton of the 80s. Well, actually, Big Trouble in Little China came out in, later 80s, but he kind of reminds me of like a Jack Burton or something like that. You know what I mean? Where he just, I don't know. He doesn't feel technical. I mean, in the beginning of the movie, he's like, running back to the plane. He's like, "Bro, we gotta get out of here."
Yeah, he's very book smart, but yeah, I agree with you there.
Yeah. He's not exactly a Laura Croft, is what I'm saying.
No.
Exactly. Yeah.
No.
Where she just knows kung fu and she knows how to use guns and all this
she
stuff.
She can basically do everything. She's the Superwoman.
Yeah, he's just doing it, like by his, bootstraps basically, and just happens to, I mean, he could die any minute, pretty much. Like
he rolls really well with his dice.
With
his D20s. He rolls real well with those D20s. That's what that is.
So let me ask you this, because, obviously, we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of this film. And, do you think after watching it now, that it still holds up and it's something that, like younger generations should watch, just like, Star Wars or anything like that?
100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, again, it's still being referenced today, 40 years later. It's just like, what other, like, how many other movies do that? Like North by Northwest is one of them that's older. With the plane like flying over the, like flying low and person diving down, but it's not as much. Like, that's it on the references with North by Northwest. That's it. I think that's the only reference that is still made today.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like this had like reference after reference after reference. And it was just like, how many? Like, it just seemed like there was such a collection of like little nods that other TV shows and movies have made to this. It was...
Yeah, it's definitely an iconic movie for sure.
Yeah, like I hate using that terminology because, it kind of sounds like a pompous ass, but, it is definitely part of the popular culture zeitgeist for sure. And, what's interesting about it is that, like, I think because of the tone and because of the feel of it, like, because it's, set in the 1930s, like it doesn't feel, like it doesn't feel dated. You know what I mean?
It feels like that's how it's supposed to look because this took place in what, the 1930s?
Like late 1930s, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel dated. You know what I mean? Like you feel like you're watching a film from from the 1980s, but it doesn't feel like, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of films that you watch now that just feel like they're from that time period, and this one doesn't feel like that at all. Like it just feels like it's in a time capsule and it just shelved and protected and will just continue to
live on forever.
It's aging gracefully.
Absolutely. On a side note, I just watched Jurassic Park the other day and I can't believe how well that movie still holds up. It's incredible.
Oh, it really does.
That's another movie that's quoted all the time.
Yeah, and that's another Steven Spielberg property. So that's why Steven Spielberg is the director that he is, because like everything that he does has some sort of longevity to it. And you know what I mean? Like, and that's no exception, when it comes to, to this one. And I don't know. I mean, there's really not too much else to say aside from, if you young people have not seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, we highly recommend it. And it's, I don't know, it could actually end up being one of your favorite movies. It's from a different time, but it just feels like it's meant to be here. You know what I mean? And just like, to say the coolest thing that we could say at, the end of the show, talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark, it feels like a treasure that's never been lost.
Oh, I love that.
You like that bookend there?
I do. I like that. I like that.
All right, guys. So that is our show. Like I said, there's actually there's a Blu-ray that just came out. I think it's a 4K Blu-ray. It's of the Indiana Jones trilogy, and if you guys can pick it up, do yourself a favor and do that. It's a masterpiece of film, and like I said, I feel like it's perfect in many ways. I couldn't really see a lot of plot holes and stuff like that when I was watching it. It really does run pretty smoothly.
I regret renting it. Let's just say that, because now I'm going to drop extra money to buy it on Amazon. So do yourself a favor, just go ahead and buy it. That's
our show. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It helps us get out to a lot more people, and we'll see you next week. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.